Hello everybody, this is Cryptobud here for today. Today's April the 22nd, 2019, and in today's video I'm going to talk about Bitcoin's price action and specifically what I am doing. And so I'm going to be doing what Dorsey is doing from Twitter. From this point forward, I'm going to go ahead and start buying Bitcoin up every single week for the next several weeks until we hit that 6,000 mark. And so what I'm going to do here is showcase to you my reasons why I'm buying Bitcoin in mass. In fact, I'm going to be going all in here in Bitcoin's price because I feel that there are a lot of different fundamental forces happening at this point that's definitely going to make Bitcoin move in the short term. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about it. Now, what I mean by all in is basically I'm going to be shifting a lot of my altcoins and pouring it into Bitcoin here specifically so that I can go ahead and take advantage of the next run up in the altcoin market. Now, for those of you guys who were here in 2017, you know what I'm talking about. I firmly believe that we are in a phase right now. We're at the edge or the cusp of an altcoin run. Now, when that's going to happen, is it going to be tomorrow, today, next week? I don't know, but I feel that every single day that passes by, we're most likely going, the odds of it actually happening are a lot higher than lower. Now, the way I like to think of this is Bitcoin is currently, in my opinion, undervalued on many different metrics. And there's a couple of indicators that I'm using. Specifically, I'm looking at wallets, and I'm also looking at the development of the Bitcoin community, and also more importantly, what's happening at the VC level and the hedge fund level as these institutions are beginning to start accumulating these coins. Now, the first thing I want to show you is we're actually going to zoom out a little bit, and let's go on to the 1 week chart just to show you guys a little bit more of what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, when you're looking at charts like this, right, and you're looking at price actions and whatnot, the first thing you always want to take a look at on the weeklies and the larger macro perspectives is what has Bitcoin done in the last several weeks. And so far, what we see is that from November 18th all the way up to there to April, we've had on the weekly chart a very, very nice consolidation. And as you saw in my previous videos, I was mentioning about this idea that Bitcoin's price really needs to carve out this bottom for this accumulation pattern to really take hold. Now, whether this market's going to take off in the coming weeks really depends on two things. The first one being is that if we can maintain this momentum on the weekly. Now, what made this last move very interesting is that this large candle here that we had on April 1st was the very first candle we've had in over 4 or 5 months where Bitcoin has consistently moved in the positive direction. The last time we had this massive green candle was back up here in July of 18 when we had 2 weeks of positive momentum, and then we had that sell-off, and then all of a sudden we had that grind fest. So case in point, whenever you get these massive shoots, these what I call on high volume, these price actions, it tends to actually have some sort of follow through. Now, also I want to mention is that from November till March, the price action for Bitcoin has been of low volatility. This actually bodes very well for situations where the price begins to accumulate at a very, very nice range. So that range we would establish for the community, it's going to be around the 3,900 level or 4,000 on the top band, and we're looking at 3,200 on the bottom band. So what we're looking for is this very narrow, tight range. So if I were to say, what is my risk to reward ratio? What I'm looking for is a possible loss of from these levels all the way down to 23%. Okay. Or in some cases, if it does go down to the ultimate lows of 37%, which would be the worst case scenario. However, looking at it from the upside potential, you're looking at a potential move to the upside of 28% if we blow through that 6,000 mark, and then up to our previous weekly high of 53. So as you can see, we're right smack in the middle. I'd say the risk to reward ratio here is a pretty much a 1-to-1 if you're looking at it from the probabilities perspective. The way I like to think of this is, what is the probability of Bitcoin going higher in the short term and long term versus your downside risk? And so what I'm looking for here specifically is, I'm okay with that, because to me it feels that yes, I may lose 37% of my money, but even if it does go down to that point, the support here is very, very strong. Now, obviously, nobody can predict whether it's going to go down to 32 first before it goes up to 7,000, or 7,000 and then go back to 32. That's basically going to be a fool's game, but I like my reward and risk to reward ratios at these points. So on the weekly, it looks very, very nice. The second thing I also want to mention is that even if Bitcoin decides to consolidate here for the near term and doesn't do anything critical, what's probably going to happen here is that's going to attract a lot of people coming in, accumulating some of these altcoins. So regardless of the cases, accumulating Bitcoin at this price is very, very beneficial. Now, if Bitcoin decides to do another massive candle in the coming weeks, in other words, the same one we had in April 1st, that would definitely trigger a massive buy point from all the FOMO buyers who are not buying at these levels. In fact, that most likely would mean that we're probably going to get multiple green candles in the coming weeks. In either case, it's a win-win. So my downside risk is 37% loss, 27% loss on the 42, which I think we're going to get a pit stop right here at 4,000 first anyway. So you're looking at a 20% loss. I think for me, it's definitely worth the risk. Either way, if we do start blowing out from these levels, we're probably going to get something parabolic, because this first candle that came in has not sold out. So the third piece of evidence I want to say, if we take a look at the daily now, is that if you take a look at the daily chart, now you're beginning to see the psychology of this market really play out. Anybody who had a chance to sell on this April 2nd candle, on this April 1st, 2nd candle, first candle, could have done it in the coming weeks. But the problem is that the bears did not sell those. And so that's what's really interesting to me, is that, you know, although I do believe that we do have a potential to drop, and I'm not saying that this is a definite guaranteed, of course not. I am saying that the longer we trend in this area, the more likely it's going to automatically hit that one point and then blow off to the top. I've seen it a lot of times. Now, in many cases, the fact that it's actually hitting this resistance zone could mean a couple of things, right? Could mean that the bulls are getting a little tired. We can't really pop that top off, and it could actually go lower. But if it does go up, then we're probably going to end up visiting that 6,000 mark. So like I said before, I'm okay with the longer time frame. If I get it wrong, for me, I'm okay with that 20% drawdown. Now here's the thing that's interesting. We actually had the exact same situation here back in February. Okay. Now what's interesting about this one is that we didn't have that green candle, but we still edged higher and higher and higher. And this is exactly what I like to see when we're getting these types of situations. Now the difference here between this situation and this situation is we technically had a really tiny, I'd say, you know, green candle here on the 8th. We grinded and then we kind of popped it all the way up. But the reason why this one makes it a little interesting is that we're seeing this kind of, you know, pennant formation. I guess we're going to call it flag or whatever you want to call it. I'm not too much on chart patterns. I'm more interested in the psychology of it. But what's happening here is that we do have a potential where it's kind of topping off at this area, and the more it kind of begins hitting that, at some point something's going to trigger it up. Now another thing I also want to notice is that we do have a lot of support here, and as I was mentioning before, if I were to just draw the support lines right here, just kind of a rough estimate, and we're beginning to see this crossover event right here. As you can see from the 50 and the 200 EMA, if we do get that crossover, we potentially going to trigger a massive amounts of people coming in, because everybody's looking at that 50 and 200 once we get that massive crossover. So, you know, at this point, some people rather say, look, let me just go ahead and wait until the breakout happens. And you can definitely do that. You can wait just kind of like you did here. You wait for the candle and then you pile in right here, but then you miss majority of that move. Or two, people start piling in right here, in this area. And then if there is a downside, which means that the price goes down, then you could go ahead and cut it loose, you know, so you kind of take a little small stop loss here at some point. I mean, I would venture to say is that if there's something in here that could potentially break, let's assume it breaks right here, then we're looking at that 5,000 mark here, you know, after this break at that 5,200 as a potential stop loss. So either way, I mean, I think it's really tough to kind of look at these situations and say, I know for sure that this is going to go up to the top. Who knows, right? But I mean, it's not reasonable to assume that I think Bitcoin can definitely reach that 6,000 mark. I mean, that's within reason, which means it doesn't really put Bitcoin too much away from that. In fact, it puts Bitcoin at somewhere around the, you know, a 12% return on that move, which is, you know, very, very reasonable, I think. Now, with all that said, fundamentally, let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin's price as the overall picture. Question here you want to ask is that, is Bitcoin valued correctly here at 5,400? And to many people, they'd say, well, I'd rather get it at 2,000. I'd rather get it at 1,000. I don't think it's worth 5,000. The problem with that argument is that if you say, I think it's worth 1,000 to me, it's worth 2,000 to me, I'd rather pick it up there, you're not realizing a couple of catalysts are coming in. So Bitcoin's halving is going to come next year, very similar to Litecoins. There's more positive catalysts right now in the pipeline than actually the negative. So let's play it, you know, in terms of the hypothetical game. Let's assume Bitcoin does retest those $3,200 levels. If it does go down to $3,200, I don't think it's going to be there that long. Most likely it'll probably do another V bottom. And the reason why I say that is because many people are looking at that 3,200, 2,000 level again, and they're saying to themselves, I'm not going to go ahead and buy more, so what I'm going to do here is probably pile in once that happens. And so unless you're at the computer looking at those prices are not going to stay there for too long. The second thing I also want to say is that even if it does go down below those $3,200 levels, the issue with that is that it's going to trigger a massive amounts of short covering at some point. So anybody who is shorting right here, which I don't think they are that many people, but if they are going to be shorting, you're going to get a massive possible short squeeze on the top end just because there's no volatility in the market. So in terms of whoever is selling and even whoever is shorting, I don't see that in the market currently. So the volatility has definitely died. I mean, it's pretty much very, very low. And I'm going to suspect that based off what I've seen so far in terms of both the volume action and also the negativity in the space, that many of the people who are selling short are not doing it at these levels. And if they are shorting here at these levels, they most likely will probably buy back at the $4,200 anyway. So that's one thing I always tell people. I say, look, what's going to drive the price of Bitcoin down? Is it going to be the fundamental? Is it going to be shorters? And I would venture to say that this time right here, there was a lot of short people, but we've already seen the rebound. And many of these people who sold are most likely going to end up rebuying back once this thing pops. So I would give this, you know, a more of a larger perspective as far as what needs to be done for Bitcoin to really continue higher. But my bet here is going to be that I think Bitcoin is going to definitely break out of this range. Now, I am definitely talking about that with my group. We're kind of figuring out a strategy here to make sure that these coins are lined up correctly. So after Bitcoin moves, there's going to be the question of what's happening with the altcoins, because the altcoins are going to be at that point playing catch up. So I'm always looking at these opportunities, and right now it's so quiet that it allows me to really think about what that plan's going to look like when we do break out or if we do break down. So either way, there's a plan and a strategy in place in the event that something happens on the upside. Now, on the fundamental news event, there really isn't any news at this point. I mean, aside from the Lightning Network and some of the fundamental pictures on the technical area, there hasn't been a lot of development in terms of Bitcoin. So that's a good thing. So all we need is that little small push for Bitcoin to break past this triangle, and then at that point we've got a FOMO event coming in, as I mentioned in my other videos. All right, well, you haven't checked out Patreon, check it out. I do have a little bit more detailed analysis that I'll be posting out specifically once we kind of get this rally underway. So double check that. If not, I'll see you guys later. Cryptobud out.